Okay, what a great turnout. It's a good session to start with the first guest of the program, Jo Howarth.
In-house as well.
In-house. She's one of our new tutors who joined the team this year. I was wondering, Jo, so do you want to give a bit of an introduction, just talk about your career highlights, who you've worked for before and where you're working now?
Yeah, of course. I never know whether you're supposed to start like an introduction about yourself at the start or the beginning, start or where you are now. But I guess I start at the start. But my first job was at Tap Management, who look after Ellie Goulding, Dua Lipa at the time, Lana Del Rey and Dermot Kennedy. And I started just as an assistant there. And I also hate saying just as an assistant. No one should ever say that. I started as an assistant there. And I started doing bits of assisting work and then started to bring in my own roster and work on day-to-day on existing clients as well. I was there for a couple of years and then I went freelance and I worked with Liam Payne and Girl in Red. I didn't really enjoy freelance life, so I went back into a company called YMU Music, who looked after Years and Years and my mind's gone blank. I looked after James Arthur at YMU, and I had a development client and a producer client and a writer client. And that's how I like to build my business. I like to have one kind of star client, one producer client, one writer client, and one development artist. And I think that's a nice way of spreading my work around, but also keeping it interesting, having different. I mean, those four things are vastly different in terms of being a manager to all of those artists, those acts. So I enjoyed that a lot. So from YMU, I have then gone to set up with just one other person, just the two of us. We're kind of a new company now. We called it Attention Management, and it's just currently two of us sat either side of a desk looking at each other going, what the hell is going on? But that's kind of hit the ground really, really fast. Our first artists were Belters Only, who currently have the third biggest selling song in the UK this year, and the third biggest selling in the UK this year, the first by an international artist. They're from Ireland, from Dublin. And we have Jazzy, who sings on Belters Only's records, but is also signed to Polydor for her own solo artist project. And then I have Mark Ralph, who is an A-list producer, produces, you will all have heard a Mark Ralph production. He produces a lot of Years and Years stuff, a lot of Becky Hill stuff, quite a lot in that kind of pop dance world. He's the go-to guy for the record labels for finishing a song. He seems to be the one that they go to when they're going, right, we've got this little bit of an idea, but we need to turn it into a song. Mark's that guy. And I also have one of my favourite clients. I can only talk about them with a smile on my face. I have a 5-piece a cappella band from a township outside Durban in South Africa. They speak Zulu. Two of them speak English, and there's a lot of translating going on when we spend any time together. But it's really sweet. They came over a few weeks ago to play at the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham, and it was their first time leaving the country. But for quite a few of them, one of them had flown to Johannesburg before. None of them had left the country before. So that was really nice. Felt like a very important part of my job that I haven't been in the position to do that for someone before, to kind of take them so far away from what they know, and yeah, that was really nice. They're back over this week.
Nice. So it sounds like you've had quite the change professionally recently. How does it feel working for a smaller company now and working for yourself essentially, compared to working for a very big artist management agency?
Yeah, I mean, the two things are very, very different. I have made this decision now because I feel like I cut my teeth in big companies, and I was really grateful to be in those places and learn so much, particularly at TAP as a place to start out in my career. I mean, I had to just pick up everything so quickly, which was like the baptism of fire that I really needed. But in terms of being on my own now, it means that I can do other things. I can come and lecture here, which I really enjoy. I would never have been able to do that in my old role, partly because I was a full-time employee, but also because I was looking after pop stars, and you don't get a second to yourself when you look after pop stars.
Fair enough. And how did you fall into that? So I guess there are two questions here. How did you get into artist management? Did you always know that, you want to pursue that career? And how did you get your first job in the industry?
I don't think that anyone knows that they want to be an artist manager, do they? Like, you just wake up
Not
one
me.
day, you just wake up one day and you realise that there's actually a job title for what you're doing. But that was me at school. So I had lots of my friends were guys in bands, and I was the one who booked their gigs. And then as they started touring, I would go and sell T-shirts. I'd book the shows, I'd advance the tour, and then I would go flog T-shirts on the night. And then, the next time around they'd go, well, we should probably call you our tour manager. And then the time after that, they'd be like, well, do you want to just manage us? So that's kind of how I started out in management. And then in terms of getting the first job, I did a degree much like you guys are doing now at Southampton Solent in Southampton, obviously. I graduated in 2018. My degree was called music management, which is sometimes I have to have a bit of a laugh about that, because it's kind of it's not, it's such a direct course, a very, very niche profession, but I was very lucky to have found it. So yeah, I all the way through uni, I did all of the internships and the volunteering at festivals and all of those things. And when it came to getting my first job, I had done a summer of festivals through 2016, where I'd seen a band called Rat Boy almost every weekend at a different festival across Europe. And when they came to look for an assistant for their manager, they thought, oh, what about that girl that we've been seeing in a field every week? So yeah, that's how I ended up at TAP.
So I guess from what you're saying, it sounds like you were just so actively involved that these opportunities ended up coming to you. I feel like I meet a lot of people who say that, oh, they just seized an opportunity. They were doing something and they got a job offer and they ended up in a career that became an actual career. Whilst, I think you and I both know that those opportunities don't just come to you. You create them by...
It's a bit of that, isn't it? Yeah. The whole time. And then someone goes, oh yeah, that girl didn't shut up. What about her?
Exactly. You go to gigs, you get involved with up-and-coming artists, you try to get involved with somebody's career early on. As you know, I'm also a manager, and I really, really agree that nobody just chooses to become an arts manager overnight, in my opinion.
I didn't know what one was. I had no idea that careers existed in the music industry. I didn't know that there was a music industry. It was just something I liked listening to music, and I was going to these gigs, and that was that, really.
But on that note, what do you think is the role of a manager? Because, there are some people here who take my module in first year, which is music industry landscape. And these sessions are sort of in parallel to the discussions that we have in class. And, this week it was, what is the role of a manager, which we covered. And I think I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
Well, opinion's the right word, because there's no defining what the role is for a manager, especially recently more than ever. The role of a manager is changing. It's swelling more than anything else, and you're taking on more and more than ever. But I mean, in a nutshell, you are a business manager. So as you would be in any industry, you are managing that person's business. However, when it involves artists, musicians, but I think probably creatives in any sense of the word, it involves quite a lot more than that as well. There is a very thin line between being a business manager and being that person's kind of personal, PA or confidant, or all of these things. And then, as an extension of your question, people also go, oh, but what does your average day look like? And you just have to scoff, because there isn't an average day. That's the beauty of doing this, is that it's something different every day. And some days, I've had a right one today. I've had visa issues today, which is always fun. But some days it's, creative campaigns and planning a strategy for the artist's rest of the year. And the next day you're resolving some kind of firefighting crisis in terms of, oh, my tour's gone on sale, but no one can actually buy the tickets. Where's that gone wrong? It really is just something different every day.
For sure. I mean, we also need to wear so many hats, right? I mean, I definitely have had that moment where I felt like I was somebody's therapist or their PA or their booking agent. And after a while, you kind of go, okay, well, maybe get some other support in your life as well. And don't just text me at 4 a.m. You know, sometimes you need to put up those boundaries with artists, or vice versa. You know, you feel like maybe you get too invested. But do you think that at a big agency, because you've had that experience, there are different roles for a manager? So there's the day-to-day manager. What does that entail, and how's that different to a senior manager?
In terms of like the different roles within an artist management company, in the big companies that I have worked for, we have had different arms as well. So we've had, you know, a team who are there to do digital for those artists, and a team that are there to look after the DSPs and the relationships with the DSPs. On the straight management side, you know, you start as an assistant and you become a day-to-day. The difference being, an assistant, you're kind of given tasks and it's your job to make those things happen. As a day-to-day, you are running that person's diary on the day-to-day, you're looking after them day-to-day, you're managing their mood day-to-day. And then as you start to bring in your own clients and take on your own clients, you become a manager, and then it's all on you. It gets a bit scary. I say it gets scary. I don't think you actually notice the difference because you just have to hit the ground so quickly. But by that point, you're managing the relationships with the label, with the agents, with the whole team, press and radio, and everybody involved in that team. You're the center of that little spider web. I guess that's the difference between the roles there.
And in those different agencies that you worked for, did you have a favorite roster? You know, you don't need to tell me the favorite artist, just a roster.
No. Do you know what? It's much easier to tell you a favorite artist because I have had such different rosters in any of the places that I've worked in. And sometimes they've been clients that I've been given and they haven't necessarily been things that I want to work on. And other times I can fully get invested in something, and they are, you know, favorite clients. I mean, The Joy, who I just mentioned from South Africa, are, you know, absolutely one of my favorite clients, and it's such an exciting such an exciting time for them. We've got a big UK TV appearance next week, like a really big one actually, that I've never even done with a UK-based client, with a major record label and all the rest of it. We have feature requests for them from huge artists, which is really exciting. And right now we're kind of holding back and going, well, let's get everything sorted and get our image right and work out who we are before we go and become the kind of features artist. That's not what we want for the boys. It's particularly difficult to fulfill that role when they're not English speakers and you're being asked sometimes to sing English top lines, or you're being asked to write Zulu top lines that then have to fit into an English song. That's another level of complication. And then another favourite client of mine is definitely James Arthur. And if any of my students who were in my first lecture last week are here, we had a long talk about James. I just think he's wonderful. I think that he has been doing this for 10 years, and it takes a lot of talent to still be doing this 10 years later. He's not had an easy ride, but he has never, ever wanted to jack it all in. He's just a fantastic person.
So how important do you think liking the music of the artist that you're representing, how important do you think that is? Because I feel like I get asked this a lot, where they ask me, you know, what's your favorite genre? Which kinds of music that you would like to represent? But ultimately for me, it's about whether they're good, right? So, you know, it could be a heavy metal band, which would be very different to my usual roster. But if I feel that connection, if I walk into the gig and really feel like this person, this band, this project could be something, and they have it, they just have that.
Yeah.
So for me, that's that. But it's different for every artist. Do you just go for artists that you like their music of?
I think that probably varies. I mean, in my personal experience, the music that I have loved most, I mean, the album campaign that I worked on with James was a rock emo album that was like heavily influenced by Post Malone and stuff like that. And I thought it was brilliant. I really loved it. It had these mad guitar riffs that no one would have expected from a pop star. I loved the music, but I think because I was so involved in him, I loved him as a person and I loved the music, I didn't get any of my own life in that period. I spent 2 years with James and I don't think I took time off. I don't think I had many days where I didn't start at 7, 8 in the morning, having walked my dog at 6 o'clock, and then gone right the way through till it's dark outside. And I think the pandemic had a lot to do with that. But since then, I've kind of taken on dance artists, and I'm quite enjoying that as like a new challenge for me. It's very different, but equally as rewarding. And actually, the rewards kind of come faster because you release more music as a dance artist. You can kind of have a new single every 6 weeks or so. But in terms of what genre I like to take on, I mean, it varies massively. I've got I was about to say a kid, that he's not a kid, but I've got a new artist I've recently taken on called Paladin, who is like a SoundCloud rapper, pop star. He's a producer and he makes these mad dub beats, and he's got a viral version of WAP that he put up on SoundCloud, and the next day it's got like 100,000 streams. And I just think he's brilliant. He's so funny and he's so fun to work with. I mean, it's that kind of thing. It's that you've got to have to take on an artist as a manager. The relationship is so far beyond being an agent or being even signing to a record label. It's so far beyond any of those things that you've got to feel really passionately about that person.
Agreed. And it's an investment into that person's
Massively.
career.
And you're not going to see any money back from that for, they reckon, about 4 years.
Oh yeah, especially at the early stages. They say 20% is the standard rate for an artist manager's commission, but when it's an up and coming artist, it could be 20% off zero.
Yeah.
Which actually leads me to my next question: how do artist managers get paid, and how do you think they should get paid?
I like the model as it is, actually. I think the general kind of variation is between 18% and 25% for very special, like a lifelong relationship, like a Colin Lester and Craig David relationship. That's worth more than 20%, I'm fairly sure. But I quite like this model because there's no way, I believe, that I should be making any money before my artist is. And I think that there should be a correlation between a manager's earnings and an artist's earnings. And 20% to me feels like a reasonable, a reasonable figure. I think that when you start talking about net versus gross, I think the kind of general rules that we have where, you take net on live, that makes a lot of sense because our artist has a lot of upfront costs when they put on a live show. So yeah, I quite like it how it is. Why? What do you think?
Well, I guess for context, I'm curious because there are loads of different discussions now. I'm a part of Music Managers Forum, quite active. It's a trade body for artist managers. Are you a member?
Yes, I am. I've been a member of the MMF for a long time, and they were really hugely supportive of me in the early days of my career as well.
I mean, they're very supportive, I think, and a great support system for any managers in this room right now as well. And there are some discussions within that group that's about should we be getting a salary? Should it be because we're consulting and advising artists and creators across so many different levels, should we then get a fee for our advice?
But then how do you quantify that?
It's a bit hard to quantify, as you said, but I feel like the other model that I'm interested in is kind of making artist managers into business partners, because I think in the current climate, there are more discussions about what it really takes to break an artist and to be there throughout their entire career. And I feel like a lot of managers feel like, you know what, we deserve a slice from the pie, and not just a percentage from the net or gross, but maybe, we should go into business together and create these companies.
I'm
what do you
not
think
sure.
of that?
I don't think I agree with that. I don't think that's right. We are not. Well, I personally am not a creative. I don't bring enough to the table for that artist to be on equal splits with it. Do you see what I mean? I feel like 20% is absolutely a fair. But I guess it depends on how much that artist is making, really, doesn't it? Because if we're talking about a manager who is looking after 6 development acts and they haven't got anything that's bringing in enough cash for them to live, how does that work? Maybe that is a different conversation. And I do know managers who work on the basis of a kind of monthly retainer. But I think by that point, you're only going to end up with a certain type of client, and they're not necessarily a client that is going to be, exciting to work with. Does that make sense? Is that politically correct?
For sure, absolutely. And do you think that, when you're first getting to know artists, it's important to sign them immediately? Because, I find that hard to navigate, because sometimes I get to know a band or a certain artist and I want to keep my eyes on them.
Yeah.
I want to mentor them until they get to a stage where I can sign them. But then there's always a risk that somebody else will poach them, which must have happened, to at least some of us here, definitely me. How do you navigate that?
So I think that one's on a case-by-case basis. So I think it probably depends on how much money they're making, how reliant you are on them for your income. I'm not sure that I believe that every artist-manager relationship needs a 40-page contract. I think that a basic level of humanity and understanding, which you would hope that anyone that you're going into business with would have, is probably enough for me in most situations. But I hear you on artists being poached, and that is a fact of what we do. And that's not to say that you're not doing a good enough job or whatever. A lot of the time it feels quite unjust. But there has been a reason for that decision, whatever that might be. And that is a part of life. It's the same as like relationships or friendships or any of that stuff. So
for sure, you never know. Just for reference, my artist got poached by Pearl Jam's manager once, and his album is one of Scotland's top 10s now. So it is what it is. You win some and you lose some.
Yeah.
But have you ever been with an artist, from the very early stages of their career and built them ground up? Do you think it's best to do that? Or for somebody starting out just now, would you prefer to, let's say, join an already established artist's team?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's very, very different things. And I actually have not, I've only ever stayed with each artist 2 years or 2.5 years, which, especially through the pandemic, I mean, I'm only 26. I've been doing this for professionally for sort of 7 years, so not really long enough to be able to give you a solid answer on that. But I also haven't stayed in the same place long enough to work with an artist for long enough to give you an answer on that. However, I've definitely seen through a few campaigns that are, in that artist's career trajectory are really important. When I worked with Girl in Red, she was really, really on the come up, and it was that time when a certain subsection of the UK had knew every word to every song, and the rest of them were just cottoning on, and that was a really fun thing to be part of, to kind of see that growth for her. And Marie is, again, a fantastic person and so deserving of every bit of success that she has, and I think that's really nice as well. Not all of them are.
No, for sure. It's a really great feeling to be so invested, because as you were saying earlier, it's more than any other job. It's much more different. It's so all-encompassing at sometimes, and it requires a personal connection too.
Yeah.
Because you work so closely with each other, right?
I also think that as well as the ones that are going like that, and you can manage those, and that's a really fun thing to be part of that growth. I think ones that have had a really rough ride, like James, and you've got a point to prove, I think that's even more fun. I think that's even more of a challenge. And again, when the person is so deserving of that success, and you can really feel like you're doing it together, that's really nice.
I mean, who doesn't love a success story, right?
Yeah.
I feel like...
Yeah, but everyone loves the underdog as well. That's what I mean. That's what I mean, an underdog.
For sure. And sometimes you wait, 20 years, and then overnight, both your life and their life, it changes, right? Sometimes you get a big festival slot and nothing's ever the same afterwards. But, I guess speaking of festivals and the life side of things, and also the challenges of the current climate, you already mentioned COVID, twice. And I was going to ask you, in terms of COVID and Brexit, obviously both of them have created big challenges for our industry. How do you think things are different now since the pandemic and post-Brexit?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I can actually comment on Brexit because I'm not sure. I think I was quite junior when all of that first started happening. My only experience of it now is this 90-day rule where you can only work in Europe for 90 days. And you see that with artists, and that's an issue, but you see it with crew even more so. So my artist B could have been touring with the same crew for however many years. However, their sound engineer's been out with a brand new band and he's done his 70 days in Europe already and he can't see through the whole of my tour. Well, that's a bit of a kick in the balls, isn't it? And I don't think it's very fair at all either, but who am I to comment? But COVID, definitely, I mean, what's the question? Is it about impact on COVID? Is it about working through COVID? Or
I guess how have they both affected your day-to-day work? Has it created any big challenges?
It obviously created challenges at the time. That was a very, especially the very start of it. The very first day of lockdown, I think it was a Wednesday, and I think it was my first day at YMU, which was really strange because I didn't get to go to my office. I didn't go to my office for a long time. I didn't actually even get to meet my artists, which is really strange. And I'm seeing all of these people on Zoom. And then when we could first have meetings, we had to have meetings in parks, which is really weird. But nowadays, I actually think that again, difficult thing to say with something that lots of people will have had a really negative time with and think about really negatively now. And obviously, you can't say that a global pandemic is a good thing. However, the music industry, on the flip side of it, we have had to change how we think about what kind of income streams we've got coming in. We've had, TikTok wouldn't be what it is now if it wasn't for the pandemic and everyone having to stay home scrolling on their phone. Isn't there a stat that we do like the length of the Eiffel Tower like that or something every day? That's mad. But yeah, TikTok is such a massive platform for artists now, and it's really changed that bit, that we're talking about the trajectories that go like that. TikTok makes you go from that to that overnight, and that we've never had anything that does that before. Not even like an NME feature in the 90s would have done that, I don't think.
And I have to say, in my day-to-day as an artist manager, a huge part of my job is trying to get people on TikTok and convincing artists of the value of TikTok.
Yeah. So there's those things that have come out of COVID. And then on the live sector, of course, which was the most heavily hit in COVID, we now, I genuinely think we're sat here coming into a cost of living crisis, and yet I can't see a huge amount of people, everyone in the UK, stopping their Spotify subscriptions as one of the first things they're going to do when we all have to tighten our belts a little bit. I think we're so dependent on music now. We're listening to more music than ever, and we're listening to such varied music more than ever. And then gigs, we've missed them for so long that we're not going to give them up that easily now, are we? I think obviously when we are all having to watch our wallets and whatever, obviously there are going to be consequences of that to things that are industries that are dependent on disposable income. But I think people are really enjoying their gigs now.
100%. Going back to the pandemic and Brexit point, the live industry was hit the most from both of those situations, and we're going to have another guest for the live sector debate, and I'm definitely going to ask the same thing in a more detailed manner. But ultimately, when something big like that happens, when something that is massive for the political economy of the ecosystem that you operate in as a manager or as an artist, then it's the manager who then tries to adjust to that, who, for example, during the pandemic, it was managers who then try to give artists a new creative outlet, who, to encourage them to go do some live streams on Instagram or
get on TikTok.
Get on TikTok or get into some virtual writing sessions, get them to socialize more. So all of these different sort of roles that you play, how do you think you still keep up to date with everything that's going on? Do you just wake up every day and read music industry news? Do you do further personal development by going to different courses or events? How do you manage to keep yourself up to date?
That's a good question, but I guess quite a lot of my like friendships are with people who work in music. So I today have had 4 different events in my diary that I will have called a meeting, but realistically I'm sitting down with a mate for a coffee, or I even had a McDonald's. And those are, you know, that's how I'm staying in touch, because we're sat there talking about, oh, so-and-so's campaign, have you seen that's gone tits up? And that's how you keep up to date. And the music industry emails are really helpful. And I think that particularly the print magazines, I'm not sure if you had them in the university, but I think those are very beneficial because more than anything, you just get to see the faces that go with the names, because you can read all of these things, but you know, to know the faces and then know that you'll recognise that person when they walk past you at the Great Escape or something like that, and you'll be able to say hello. I think that's quite useful.
Oh, the Great Escape is definitely a great place for a hello. Were you there this year?
Yes, I was. Yes, I love the Great Escape.
Well, maybe I'll catch you next time. I feel like having a good support mechanism, a group of friends, as you said, is really important, because sometimes it's as easy as hearing other people's horror stories, learning from their mistakes.
Absolutely, that's a big part of it. But also having a girl gang is really important for women in music, to have your little girl gang. I think that's really good.
That is definitely, I would agree with that. And in terms of those horror stories, obviously you don't need to name any names, but...
Oh, I could.
If you want to,
give me a
for
few
sure.
More beers. No, I'm joking.
You know, but do you, because I've had situations where, you know, I was managing an artist and this person was, you know, a big producer in Turkey, and he was on holiday with his family, and they decided to, you know, go to Greece on this island, and they decided to get off their boat, and the boat just left them there because they wanted to just stay there, have a lunch, and just go off schedule, right? So I get a call in the middle of a day on a Sunday when I'm at my aunt's birthday, and they asked me to get them picked up from this secluded island in Greece, and I have no idea how to do that, but somehow I managed to send a speedboat to get them picked up and then have them returned. And I haven't even had a thank you from this client. So that's why I'm wondering, you know, what's your horror story? Actually, let me rephrase that. What has been the most difficult ask that you've had from a client?
Oh, I've had a few. And I've got a few that I can actually tell.
Great.
So my festival season that I mentioned, when I did different festival, for the whole summer, different festival every weekend for the whole summer, and because I did quite a few European ones, and I was so the role I did at these festivals was called artist liaison, and because I was often the only British person in the team of artist liaisons at each of these European festivals. I mean, I turned up at one in Belgium and I got given Rihanna. I was, 2016, so I was in my second year of uni. I must have been about 20 or 21, and I ended up looking after Rihanna. That was mental. Her helicopter landed as she was due on stage, and it was like, go on stage, and she stood up on stage, and first thing she said, holding her out like this, she goes, "Hello, Belgium," and I was like, shit. Is it my job to go and tell her that it's called Belgium? So that was fun. I've been sent round Oxford looking for a very, very specific brand of red wine for Duran Duran. And two separate pop stars who will remain nameless, one of whom I've had to go bra shopping for on a Sunday before an award ceremony, and the other one I've had to go and turn the tap on for her cat in her house because it wouldn't drink out of a water bowl. So there you go.
Wow, okay. Well, I'm sure there'll be a lot of follow-up questions from the audience. We will eventually turn this into a Q&A, so prepare your questions, and I don't want to take up too much from that time. And I have a few more questions that I would like to just fire away.
Go for it.
We spoke about producers because we've both managed producers, and you know, it's very easy to
finish your sentence.
Well, sometimes they say it's easy to manage producers. I definitely enjoy it in terms of revenue streams because, you know, when you have a producer or an arranger or a composer, you know, you can have them do library music, you can have them do bespoke commercials, you can send something to them and they'll have it ready for you as long as they're in the studio. So in terms of the extent of things that they could do, where they can travel and, you know, how much it costs to put them in a show, it is sometimes helpful. But do you think there is a specific type of creator that you think is the easiest to work with?
No.
No.
I mean, they all have their things, don't they? They're creatives. So that's the nature of what we do. I have worked with just about, I haven't worked with a metal band, I have to say, but I've worked with nearly everybody. And I would just say that when I'm talking about producers as well, I think you're talking about producers who go and perform, right? So like DJs. Yeah, so when I'm talking about producers, I mean the producers that sit in their studios all day and they're not traveling. And their work is usually paid work, which we all know as artists is hard to come by, but for producers,
Ooh,
do you see what I mean?
It's money without the stress.
Well, there's still the stress. There's still the stress, but for a manager, your role is far less involved. There's more of a process to it, so it's very different when you're doing it alongside an artist management role, and then you've got your producer who is going to answer the phone when you ring them, and you know that they're going to be in the studio. I mean, Mark lives in his studio. He is there. It's not even in his house. But he drives there every day, and he is there by 9:30, and he doesn't leave until what he's working on for the day is done. So some of his days he tends to do like kind of 2 writing sessions a week, and the rest of the time he's working on paid work. I mean, that's unbelievable as a manager, right? You can't,
for sure.
You can't knock that. And the work ethic that Mark has is absolutely second to none. I've not worked with any client, producer, DJ, band, artist, anything with the work ethic that Mark has. I think it's admirable.
Well, work ethic is a really good point. I feel like I get asked a lot as an artist, how do I get signed to an artist manager? How do I get signed overall? And my answer is usually, you don't come to us, we come to you. We find you if you're good enough, and if you built enough of an audience or a profile. So what would you say to somebody who wants to get signed? What are the types of attributes, such as work ethic, that you would be looking for?
You've got to be a grafter. That's the first and foremost. You've got to be a likable person because people have got to want to work with you. But you've got to have the appeal of an audience as well, because people are going to be wanting to invest their time and their money in you, and they need to know that they're going to have some kind of return on that. So the audience has to be there, and they have to be excited about you.
Yeah, do we get that? Nice. What's the most interesting part of your job, Jo?
I mean, I love that I get to travel. I definitely used to love it more. When I worked with James, we did a lot of touring, and I was away from home a lot. I realised that, as a teenager, a late teenager, and when I was at uni, I did a lot of touring, and I loved it then. However, as I've got a little bit older, and I think this side of the pandemic as well, spending so much time at home, I've become a little bit of a homebody, and I've moved out of London, and I live in a little village, and I've got a dog and a horse, and I just quite like being at home. So a lot of people think that the travel is like a massive win. Definitely used to think it was. But now I'm not quite so sure. But the best part of my job, I think, is I don't know if it's cringy to say, but like it's just a bit of an honour to be part of an industry that I guess so many people want to work in, and it's really nice to be part of campaigns that are so public facing that you can go to a party and say, oh, I do this, and people want to, and you're like, do you know what? It's actually not that interesting, but I'm going to make it sound like it is. Nice.
I always say it's less glamorous than it sounds.
I basically work an office job. Like, yeah, it's a bit like that sometimes. So,
okay, well, let's keep it real then. What's the most stressful thing about your day-to-day?
Visas. I have to say that today. No, I mean, the stressful thing about the day-to-day is just feeling like you've never done it all, because you can't have ever done it all. It just goes on and on and on. And you have to find a place where you can cut off and go, okay, well, I've given all I can give today. And that's really difficult, I think. When you're so passionate about what you're working on, it's really difficult to put it away at the end of the day. And sometimes you don't. And then you burn out and you get in trouble.
Well, that brings me to one of my last questions, which is, how do you balance your social life? How do you balance your work and avoid getting a burnout? Because there are so many people in the industry who are actively struggling with that, and there are loads of obvious mental health issues that is in our industry because of our, I think, just the default way of how things are run. And I know so many bands who've been to band therapy, which is real and it works. I can tell from experience. How do you deal with that?
Well, again, I'm very lucky to have my little girl gang of people that I know that I can trust. Choosing friends in the music industry isn't always easy, but when you've got your people and you know that you can, what's the word, like, dump.
Yeah.
You can go, this has happened to me today and it's been a bit crap. That's really important. But also, for me, it is having that distance between London and where I live. And I get on my train every morning. I've started writing my lectures on my train, and then I get into my office and I do my real job, my music, like my music job. And then I have a bit of separation now. And definitely, as a dog lover, I have to say that my dog is the thing that keeps me sane, because every morning, rain or shine, I am out at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, walking my dog. And that's an hour where I don't look at my phone. And that to me is really important.
Well, after the session, we will add all of you to our support group on WhatsApp. Okay, well,
I'll bring my dog in as well if you want. Everyone can have a bit of canine
send
therapy.
some dog pictures, I'm sure we would all love to see that. We'll circulate it. So I want to move on to the Q&A, but here's my final one, right? Bit of a cliche, but let's make it interesting. So who would you really, really like to work with that you haven't yet, but dead or alive? So it could be anybody, dead or alive. Who's your dream client?
I mean, the answer is so predictable. You know what I'm going to say, don't you? The answer is so predictable that it's actually sickening, because I am a white girl of a certain age and I love Harry Styles. And that is it. That's all I can say about that.
Well, give it up for Joe! All right, thank you so much for that. Yeah, it was really fun to hear your experiences, because at the end of the day, arts management is case by case. We all have our own stories, we all have our experiences, and, this is a platform for us to share all of that. And as you said, like if you have a good friend group, if you have a good support mechanism, then you can share these stories, you can learn from each other, and you could become better music professionals.
And some of the, my friends that I use in that way, but that I have in that way today are people that I met at uni as well, which is really nice. So these people in the room could be those people for you, which is why you're here.
Well, you've won an award, right? By UK Music. What was it? The best music graduate or most promising?
Yeah,
what was it?
It's called an OMG.
Okay.
It's called an Outstanding Music Graduate Award by UK Music. And at the end of each academic year, each university that teaches music business put forward one graduate from the year before. So they've spent a year working in industry. And it's mostly just so you can have a boozy night out. It doesn't even matter who wins, does it? But it was nice to take home a little trophy. It just made my mum happy.
Well, that's great. I feel like all of your students should be aspiring towards that.
Yeah, for the boozy night out. Yeah, it's really good fun.
For sure. And speaking of which, obviously, I know that we also have some non-LCCM guests here tonight. It's good to see so many different attendees coming in. So I want to open the floor to some questions, and you can start by asking Joe about anything you like. Should we get a mic? Yeah, you're good?
I was wondering if you could tell us any more about Girl in Red, what part of her career would you wish her for?
So it was just pre-album, just before the album. Yeah, she's just lovely. She's just a proper creative. I've had the privilege of working with two artists that I think that I would class as like proper creatives. They eat, live, sleep, breathe this like creativeness, and it makes their head sometimes a little bit swimmy. But the things that they create are just art. Everything that Marie creates is art. The other one that I worked with is Rat Boy. He just did it all. He used to do his own album like artworks. He used to make his own videos, and all of it was so on brand, and no one could ever understand. And like Marie, no one could ever do that for her. Like it has to all come from her. Even her label team, she's signed to AWOL, which stands for Artists Without a Label, and it's supposed
Not
to
anymore.
Well, yeah, not anymore. But it's it's supposed to be a more indie kind of approach to a label, which means that she can have that kind of creative control herself. I mean, no one's telling Marie what to do, that's for sure.
Well, brand consistency is everything.
Yes, Marie has it down to a T. I worked with her through, if you're a fan, you'll know the campaign where there were billboards everywhere that said, do you like a girl in red? That was really good fun.
Does that answer your question? Do we have any more? Come on, don't be shy. Them first and then here.
Yeah, what's the minimum amount of music business knowledge an artist would need to get management?
Well, an artist doesn't need... I'm not quite sure how to answer that. So what's the minimum amount of industry knowledge that an artist needs to get management? Well, I think that if you, sir, are an artist and you are trying to work out what you need in order to get management, then you need to be an artist, right? I don't think you need to worry about the industry side of things. You need to be an artist. You need to, I guess the bit of the industry that you need to worry about is how you get that audience. And that's the only bit that an artist needs to know about. The rest of it, once you've built that audience, that's what you bring a team, that's what you have a team around you for. It's my job to know about the industry so that my artists don't have to do all of those things because they've got more than enough on their plate already. I mean, we sit here and say we have so much to do as artist managers. Artists have even more to do. So
for sure. I mean, it wouldn't hurt to come to an event like this and get to know some industry people and network.
I mean, the contacts are important for sure as an artist. But being an artist is the first and foremost thing that an artist needs to think about, I think.
Well, as you said also, and building an audience, because I feel like, if you are playing shows that are all booked out, and if you already have hundreds of people coming to see you, or if you have a big social media following or hundreds of thousands of followers on Spotify, people will knock on your door anyway. So you need to work on building that fan base. Anybody else? JD, do we have time for more questions? 2 more. Make it count,
just
people.
A peace sign.
Make it count.
Thank you. My question was going to be, how does it feel working with those artists? You said the a cappella group, The Joy.
Yes.
So whilst
I smile every time I think of them.
She loves them.
By the way, I am South African as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But yeah, I was going to say, because they're so niche, how do you get over those kind of challenges?
So I don't think they're niche. I mean, if I can leave you all with one thing, it's go home and listen to The Joy. Like, I don't think that they're niche. I think that their music, Zulu, correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not an expert on South African culture, but I think Zulu is not a widely spoken language in South Africa, right?
It is. It
is widely spoken?
Yes, the second.
Right, okay. Yeah. But so when we went to the South African village at the games in Birmingham, they were all speaking Afrikaans, and the boys were alienated even then, surrounded by other South Africans. So that's why I thought it was I thought it was just a little West pocket that spoke Zulu, but evidently that's not the case. But I think that when you listen to an a cappella group like that, the emotion transpires whatever it is that you're listening to. You can listen to The Joy and you can feel like you know what they're talking about, even if you've got not a clue. I mean, the perfect example, I'm not sure that I should actually say this, but one of their songs that went mad on TikTok and really took off is about a chicken. It's about some proverb about a chicken, and yet no one knows that. It sounds like this beautiful song. I think that's amazing. I don't think it's niche at all. I mean, if I could tell you the kind of artists that are hitting us up to have features, you'd realise it's not niche. Like they're going to be a big band for sure. I'll have that on camera as well.
Very nice. I mean, it's so great to have a guest like you who's clearly so passionate about her art.
You can't do this if you're not passionate about it.
That's what you need in an artist manager. So we have one last question that we can take. Who wants to go last? Come on, people. This is Jo Howarth.
Please.
She wants your questions.
I guess my question would be, what would you say are the main key skills you need to have to be an artist manager? Would it be like the creative and strategy side, or is it kind of those people skills? Like, what would you say, like a natural strength you need to have to be good in the role?
So I answered this question at another university earlier last week, and I changed my answer halfway through. So I started saying that I thought it was the people skills, but I've recently started working with a manager who is actually quite quiet and reserved, but can still kind of command a room in a label meeting and stuff like that. I thought that was really admirable because I thought it was my big gob that had got me in this job. But I actually think when I changed my answer when I answered it last week, I think that it's about determination. And especially if you are a woman and you are an artist manager, I think you come up against a fair few more barriers than our male counterparts do. And you have to just get on with it. But even for you have to pick yourself up and start again. But for any manager, male or female or other, you have to just be able to have a Barney with your artist and then go into your separate rooms for 20 minutes, think, I need to cool off, and you have to go and start again with a smile on your face. And that's just part of what we have to do. And not only is it artists, but there's a lot of egos in the music industry and you have to put up with those as well. So it is just about getting up and doing it again, I think. Absolutely.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I would say resilience is definitely key.
That's the one.
And conviction. You know, sometimes you got to believe in an artist when nobody else does. And sometimes they don't even believe in themselves. And you're the one who needs to lift them up. So thank you so much for such a good talk. And
thank you for having me.
Inspirational, for sure. All right, another round of applause. Thank you so much for coming. Please stick around for the open mic.